Hello, everyone, and welcome back to our virtual Dirshu Mishnah Berurah share. We are holding in Mishnah Berurah Chelik Hey. We pick up today on Kuf Lamed Zayin Amid Aleph. We're holding in the middle of Siman Tuf Kuf Tes Vav. We finally completed Sif Aleph yesterday. We pick up today on the top line of Kuf Lamed Zayin Amid Aleph with Sif Beis. Says the Mechaber, Afilu Taloshan Ha'ena Yehudi Oitzadan La'atzmai. We have been discussing until now a case of where a non-Jew went ahead and picked produce. Let's say he picked apples and he brought it for a Yid on Yom Tov, or he went ahead and he trapped an animal. Let's say he caught fish on Yom Tov and he brought them to the Yid, and what the halachas of that produce or that fish would be. Now the Mechaber turns to a case where we're not concerned about the non-Jew having done Meleches Isser on Shabbos or on Yom Tov on behalf of the Yid. Over here, afilu tlashan ha'eni Yehudi oitzadan la'atzmai. Let's say the non-Jew went and he picked apples for himself, or tzadan la'atzmai, or he went fishing and he trapped fish for himself. He didn't do this for Yisrael. It's not that he came to sell it in a Yiddish town where we assume that was his plan all along. It's not that he brought a gift for the Yid. This pshat that, you saw the non-Jew walking off the fishing pier. The non-Jew just went fishing. He enjoys fishing. And, you said to him, "Oh, I see you have some fresh caught fish over there. Would you be willing to part with some of your fresh caught fish? I could use some for my holiday Suda." Or you saw that he picked apples. "Oh, wow, look at that beautiful fresh picked apples. Maybe we should make an apple pie." So in this case, even though the non-Jew did do malacha on Yom Tov, but it wasn't done b'shvil Yisrael. It wasn't done on behalf of the Yid. So there's no problem of me having hana from the malacha that the non-Jew did. There's only a problem when he did it for Yisrael. That's not the case over here. So says the Mechaber, you still have a problem. Afilu talashan ha'eni Yehudi oitzadan la'atzmai. Even if the non-Jew went ahead and he picked or harvested this produce, or he went ahead and he trapped an animal for himself, or if you happen to be like me, who has an apple tree on the side of his house, and the apples fell off the tree. Nobody picked the apples. So again, there's no meleches iser here. Or somehow an animal became trapped on its own. Still in all, says the Mechaber, you are not allowed to eat that produce or that fish or other animal on that day of Yom Tov or l'taltalai, nor are you allowed to handle it. And the reason for this is because of muktzah. The problem over here is you're dealing with apples or with an animal that were mechusar tzeda. It's an animal that had yet to be trapped, or it was something which was not yet picked. It's an apple that's still on a tree at the onset of Yom Tov, so it's muktzah. At the onset of Yom Tov, these items were muktzah. They were not muchan. They weren't picked. They weren't trapped. So they were muktzah at Ben Hashmashas. They remain muktzah on Yom Tov. And the Mechaber continues, and he says, Af lemi shaloi huvu b'shviloi. This Isser is not dependent on who it was brought for. It's not dependent on that at all, because over here we're dealing with an Isser of muktzah. We're not dealing with a problem of meleches Isser. So these items are also on Yom Tov because of muktzah for everybody. They're also for every Yid because they were muktzah at the outset of Yom Tov and they continue to be muktzah now. Aval, however, in this case, la'erev mutarin miyad b'motzai Yom Tov. In this case, there's no need to wait ad kedei sheyaseh after Yom Tov. Over here, we don't have to wait after Yom Tov for the time period that it would take the non-Jew to go travel to the fishing pier, fish for the fish, travel back to you. That Isser of Kidei Sheyaseh is only when we're dealing with a problem of Meleches Isser. When the problem that we have is that the non-Jew did malacha for you, and you're not allowed to be neneh from his malacha, then we have to wait after Yom Tov for the time period that the malacha could have been done beheter after Yom Tov. But over here, the Meleches Isser is not our problem. Over here, the problem is a muktzah problem. So as soon as Yom Tov is over, the muktzah is over, and now it's mutter. Now let's take a look at the Mishnah Berurah, who's going to say most of what we spoke out outside. Says the Mishnah Berurah is Chav Gimel. Aser la'achla, explains the Chavetz Chaim, mishum muktzah. Over here, the problem is a muktzah problem. Kevin shahaya mechuber me erev Yom Tov ben hashmoshes. Since these apples were on the tree at the outset of Yom Tov ben hashmoshes, so they remain aser, it remains muktzah for the duration. Same thing would be by the fish, let's say. The fish, it was in the lake, it wasn't yet caught, it was mechusar tzeda at the outset of Yom Tov, it remains aser. Now, the Chavetz Chaim tells us, muktzah de mechuber, this type of muktzah of an apple that was on the tree at the outset of Yom Tov, or the muktzah of a fish that had yet to be caught at the outset of Yom Tov, aser l'kulei alma. This is aser because of muktzah according to everybody. What does that mean according to everybody? So if you look at the Sharet Siman, Gimel, the Chavetz Chaim tells us, Hainu afilu l'Rebbi Shimon. This is even according to the Shita of Reb Shimon, who's more makel by muktzah. But this type of muktzah, where this is almost like an aktsinu biyadayim, this is almost like the groigrois and simukim, the raisins or the dried figs that you put up onto your rooftop, you amakta them biyadayim. So too, when the apples were left on the tree or the fish were left in the lake, they're totally removed from your mind. You know that you cannot possibly use them on Yom Tov. So this rises to the level of aktsinu biyadayim. So this is also l'kuli alma. Now the Chavetz Chaim also points out that when it comes to something like the fruits on the tree, you've got another problem. There's an additional problem. Ubeperos, when it comes to fruits, yesh by oid iser. There's an additional iser besides the iser of muktzah, which is mishum shema yala v'yitlosh. If we're going to be matter those apples for you, so if we're going to be matter apples that you know were picked today on Yom Tov, you'll eat the apple, you'll say, wow, that was one of the best apples I ever had, fresh, straight off the tree. You know what? I look outside, I see there are more apples on the tree. Wow, I could have another one. So you might come to go pick an apple from the tree. Lakach, asru, ba'achila, ubetiltal. So that's another reason why there would be asr, both ba'achila and betiltal. Now we go to Iskam Chav Dalet. Af lemi shaloi huva b'shviloi. The Mechaber said that in this case where we're dealing with an isser of muktzah, over here, there's no reason to be mechalik. We're not going to make a difference between who the fruits were brought for, the yid that they were brought for, as opposed to other Yisraelim. Over here, there's no chilik. Now, the first thing the Chavetz Chaim is going to deal with is that this statement of the Mechabers seems to be very strange. What do you mean, af lemi shaloi huvu b'shviloi? Even for the one that the guy didn't bring it for. This case of Sif Beis, we started off Sif Beis the Mechaber by saying afilu tloshana ena Yehudi aitzadam la'atzmai. Over here, we're dealing with a case where we know that the non-Jew did the picking of the apples or the fishing of the fish. He did it for himself. So what do you mean now when you say that there's no difference between the one he brought it for and the one he didn't bring it for? He didn't bring it for anybody. He fished for himself. You found him by the fishing pier and you wanted to fish from him. But he didn't bring it for anybody. So the Mishnah Berurah explains, Pirush, we could be talking about a case where the non-Jew went ahead to the fishing pier because he wanted to go fishing for an hour. He went fishing for an hour. He had a very lucky day and he caught 25 fish. He realizes he doesn't need 25 fish. After he got into his car and loaded it up with 25 fish, he said to himself, what am I going to do with all of this flounder? And he remembered, I know that fellow Rabbi Weiss. I know he likes fresh flounder, and I know today is his holiday. You know what? I'll bring it to him. But in that case, the Meleches Isser wasn't done for me. He did the fishing for himself. After he completed the Meleches Isser, he decided to go bring me a fish. But now I'm called the one that he brought it for. Still in all, says the Mechaber, there's no reason over here to be mechalik between me and anybody else. Over here, the Isser is an Isser Muktzah. So the flounder is just as much usser for me as it is for Shlomo Zalman, who would also enjoy, I'm sure, a nice freshly caught flounder. By the way, you should know, the freshly caught flounder, I did have such a case, not on Yom Tov, where a guy that I know went fishing and he caught a trunk load full of flounder. He knew I would appreciate it. He came to my house. He took my knife and he put newspaper down on my table, and he cleaned, filleted everything, and he left me a whole bunch of fish, and we had it for supper that night. And let me tell you, after eating that, you'll never eat the frozen stuff from the freezer again. It's unbelievable. Okay, We can make that a little bit of an advertisement for David Schoenfeld. If you want to taste some good flounder, call David, tell me you want some fresh flounder. Okay. So Pirish the Betchilot Lashon Haitzad Latzmai. V'achakach Nimlach Lahavi Yisrael Aser Ba'isei Hayoim. So it remains Aser on that day. Bein Yisrael Zeh. It's Aser for Rabbi Weiss that the guy brought it for. Bein La'acher, but it's Aser for Shlomo Zalman too. Because since over here we're dealing with an Isser of Muktzah and not an Isser of Meleches Isser, there's no nafkamin at all who it was done for. In this case, the Mechaber said, Lo erev mutarin miyad. At night, when Yom Tov is over, Shabbos is over, whatever it is, this is mutar immediately. Says the Chavetz Chaim, when we say that it's mutar right away, Va'afilu erev haya Yom Tov, kegoin shnei yomim tovim shel goliath. Even, this is true, even if we're talking about shnei yomim tovim shel goliath. Now let's remember, I know this was very complex, but over the last 2 days, we spoke about this machlokes, the Machaber and the Ramah, which is based on a machlokes Rishonim. We spoke about this repeatedly. The question of when the goy goes ahead and he fishes for fish, he catches fish on the first day Yom Tov, and he brings it to you on the first day Yom Tov, when does it become mutter? According to the Mechaber, it becomes mutter at the end of Yom Tov Rishon. Matzah Yom Tov Rishon, after Kedei Sheyaseh, it's already mutter. According to the Ramah, the Yesh Machmirin, it's also Aser on Yom Tov Sheni for the one that it was brought for. For everybody else, it's mutter. That was the machlokes that we had of the Mechaber and the Ramah. And I'll remind you, the rationale of the Mechaber was, the Mechaber said, you have a Mamanavshach. If the guy brought it on the first day of Yom Tov, now we're coming to the second day of Yom Tov. The Mechaber said, I don't see any reason to answer it on the second day of Yom Tov. Mamanavshach. If the first day of Yom Tov was Kadosh, so all right, so the guy did the Meleches Isser on the first day of Yom Tov. It's the Paris Hamuktzah, and there's a problem of Meleches Isser. But now that the first day of Yom Tov is over, and let's say Yom Tov was Tuesday, Wednesday, now it's Wednesday afternoon, it's already after the time of Kedei Sheyaseh, after the Yom Tov Rishon, and maybe today, maybe Yom Tov Sheni is really Chayil. So if yesterday was Kadosh and today is Chayil, so why can't I eat it now on Wednesday afternoon? There's no problem with me being nene from Meleches Isser that was done yesterday. It's already after Kedei Sheyaseh of Yom Tov Rishon. And let's say today, Wednesday, is Kadosh. Well, then yesterday was Chayil, and then there was no Meleches Isser, because when the guy caught it, it was Chayil. So that was the rationale of the Mechaber. The Mechaber said we can employ this Memanavshach that we've employed many times already when it comes to Shnei Yom Tovim Shel Goliath. The Ramah said no, it's still also on Yom Tov Sheni because we have a different problem. The problem is if we're going to be matir that fish or those apples on Yom Tov Sheni, then another time a Yid might say to a guy, do me a favor, my Yom Tov is Tuesday and Wednesday. Do me a favor, pick some fresh apples on Tuesday, that's Yom Tov Rishon. And the Yid knows I'm not going to be able to use them on Yom Tov Rishon because they were picked by a guy on Yom Tov Rishon. But I'll wait till Yom Tov Sheni, and I'll eat them on Yom Tov Sheni because of Mimanavshach. That we can't do. Now you have a Yid expressly asking a guy to do malacha for him on Yom Tov. So the Ramah said we have to answer it until after Kedei Sheyaseh of Yom Tov Sheni. That was the machlokes we had, the Mechaber and the Ramah. However, over here in our case, there is no Meleches Isser. Over here we're talking about a case where the guy did it for himself, or the apples fell off the tree by themselves. So over here, the Mechaber said, L'erev mutarin miyad. Explains the Mishnah Berurah, Va'afilu l'erev haya Yom Tov, kigon shnei yomim tovim shel goliath. When the Mechaber says that they're mutter on Matzah Yom Tov, he means that they're mutter on Matzah Yom Tov of Yom Tov Rishon. If the apples fell off the tree by themselves, it's on Yom Tov Rishon, so they're also on Yom Tov Rishon because of Muktzah. But Matzah Yom Tov Rishon, they're already mutter. Why? Because why were they also on Yom Tov Rishon? They were also on Yom Tov Rishon because of Muktzah. Because Ben Hashmashas of the first day of Yom Tov, they were Muktzah, they were on the tree. So they're also for the whole day of Yom Tov. But the 2 days of Shnei Yom Tovim Shel Goliath are two different kedushos because it's a suffix, right? So the two different kedushos. Just because it was muktzah ben hashmashos of the first day of Yom Tov, that doesn't make it muktzah on the second day of Yom Tov. So the isser of muktzah does not carry over from the first day of Shtei Yom Tovim Shel Golius to the second. It would carry over on 2 days of Rosh Hashanah, because that's Yom Arichta. But Shtei Yom Tovim Shel Golius, the isser of muktzah, does not carry over from one day to the next. So mutter b'sheni l'kuli alma. V'rak b'shtei Yom Tovim Shel Rosh Hashanah aser gam b'sheni dekiyuma arichta dami. V'gam b'Shabbos hasamach l'Yom Tov aser b'shom hachana kanal. Also, let's say you had Shabbos and then Sunday was Yom Tov. So then the apple that fell off the tree by itself on Shabbos is not going to be mutter motzei Shabbos. Why? The isser of muktzah doesn't carry over from Shabbos to Yom Tov. No, but there's a different problem. There's the problem that we learned about yesterday, which is the hachana problem. The fact that the apple fell off the tree on Shabbos is an act of hachana, and that act of hachana happened on Shabbos, and ein Shabbos meichen l'Yom Tov, ein Yom Tov meichen l'Shabbos. So if you have Shabbos and then you have Sunday as Yom Tov, or if you have Friday as Yom Tov and then come Shabbos, in both of those cases, if the apple fell off the tree on Friday or the apple fell off the tree on Shabbos, it will be usher for both days because of hachana, not because of muktzah, because of hachana. I know that this is somewhat complex. I hope I'm explaining it nice and clearly. It's hard. I don't see your faces. Baruch Hashem, I still remember what your faces look like. One of these days, I know I keep on talking about it, but one of these days soon, we have to do a Zoom just so that we can see each other. Okay. Ois Katan Chavav. The Mechaber said in this case, there's no difference between the one that the apples or the fish were brought for and anybody else. Right? Chavav. Yeah. Shehuvu b'shviloi. It doesn't matter even the person that it was brought for, it's mutter. Points out the Chavetz Chaim not so fast, not always. The dafga im hevion mitoich hatchum. This is only true if the non-Jew brought the apples or the fish from within the tchum. So then there is no problem of meleches iser at all, right? He fished for himself, he picked the apples for himself, and he brought them from within the tchum. So then there's no problem. Avalim hevion michutz l'tchum. But if we know that the non-Jew brought the apples or the fish from outside of the tchum, after hatlisha hayala atzmai, even though he picked the apples for himself, so that malacha was not done b'shvil Yisrael, asar al kalpanim mishum tchumin, still the apples would be asar because of tchum, because the apple is an apple that came from outside the tchum, lemi shehuva b'shviloi, for the one that it was brought for, b'kdei sheyasu, and that will be asar until after kdei sheyaseh, kimavur b'sif hey, like we'll see tomorrow in Hashem in sif hey. Okay, that was sif beis. Now we go to sif gimel. Says the Mechaber. Afilu imhu safik im nilketu oinitzaidu hayoim. Let's say we have this same case where we know that the non-Jew picked the apples or went fishing for himself. But over here, we don't know for sure when he caught them. It's not that we caught the guy on the fishing pier and we know that he just caught it today. We know that maybe he's my auto mechanic and I know him very well. And I know that he enjoys fishing. So I know that he has fresh caught fish. But over here, I don't know. Did he catch them today on Yom Tov, or did he catch them yesterday on Erev Yom Tov? Says the Mechaber, even if we only have a suffix, we don't know for sure if the trapping or the picking was done today on Yom Tov, or maybe it was done prior to Yom Tov. Asurim, this produce or these fish are still asur, and like we're going to see right away in the Mishnah Berurah, the isser over here is the isser of safek muktzah. We already had earlier. Let's remember this was in Taf Tzadik Zayin. Taf Tzadik Zayin Siv Gimel. That's on Kuf Dalid Amid Beis. Taf Tzadik Zayin Siv Gimel. We had the Mechaber that says Afilu Safik Tzeda Asr. Even if there's a suffix, if something was trapped on Yom Tov, it is Asr. Kegoin Mitsudais Chaya Dogim Va'oifais. If you have traps that were prusais me Erev Yom Tov, they were set on Erev Yom Tov, Ulamacher Moitzi Behem, and tomorrow on Yom Tov you find something trapped in those traps, Asurim, even though we only have a suffix. We don't know for sure that they were trapped on Yom Tov. The trap was already set on Erev Yom Tov. Maybe it was trapped on Erev Yom Tov. It's still Aser. Why is it Aser? Because of Safik Muchan. Safik Muktzah, we're Machmaran. So too over here. What's the Isser over here? It's an Isser of Muktzah. If the guy fished the fish on Yom Tov, or if he picked the apples on Yom Tov, so then they were on the tree, or they were Mechusar Tzeda Ben Hashmashas going into Yom Tov, so they're Muktzah. Over here we have a suffix, it's Safik Muktzah. Safik Muktzah, we're Machmaran. So Afilu with Safik and Milkatu and Yitzaydu Ayayim, Asurim. Says the Mishnah Berurah Eis Katan Chav Zayin. Afilu with Safik. First, the Chavetz Chaim identifies for us which case the Mechaber is going on. Says the, why is it so dark here? Okay, just noticed that. Okay, says the Chavetz Chaim here. Zen nami koi ba'akom sheliket la'atzmoi. This case over here of the Mechaber is going back on who is discussing in Siv Beis, the case where the non-Jew did the fishing or the picking for himself. De'ein boy ela iser muktzah. So again, the only Isser that we're concerned with over here, excuse me, is the Isser of Muktzah. There's no problem here of Meleches Isser. The only problem over here is a Muktzah problem. Still, Mikamakam Gambis Safik Aser. Still, it's even Aser Misafik. The Safik Muchan Aser, because Safik Muchan is Aser. Oh, he brings down Kimavur B'Siman Taf Tzadik Zayin Sif Gimel, like we saw earlier in Taf Tzadik Zayin Sif Gimel that I just quoted to you. Now, Ulahachi, because that's the case that the Mechaber is addressing over here, because the Mechaber is addressing a case where the only thing that we're concerned with is the Isser of Muktzah, but not the problem of Meleches Isser, Ulahachi lo yizker kana Mechaber le'inyan kedei sheyasu. That's why the Mechaber does not say over here that these apples or these fish are Aser until Matzah Yom Tov after B'kdei Sheyaseh. Because over here, there's no reason to wait after B'kdei Sheyaseh. We're only dealing with a Muktzah problem. We're not dealing with a Meleches Isser problem. Because when the guy picked it for himself, ain't tzarich kedei sheyasu kanal b'sif hakaydim, like we discussed previously in Siv Beis. Okay, however, im vaday likton oitzadon hayoim. Let's say a little bit of a different case. Let's say we do know for certain that the non-Jew went fishing today on Yom Tov, or he went picking his apples today on Yom Tov. Varak suffix, but we have a different suffix. Varak suffix, the suffix that we have is im likton v'tzadon b'shvil Yisrael. We don't know. We have a suffix. Did he really go fishing for himself because he wanted to spend his afternoon fishing? Or did he really go fishing because he knew that I like fresh flounder and he knew that today was Yom Tov? You know, I was in by the mechanic yesterday and I told him that tomorrow was Shavuos, and I told him that we eat a milchige meal, and I told him that I like to have fish, and I told him I'm planning on having flounder, and I'm going to use the frozen flounder from the freezer. And pumped, guess what? He shows up with fish. I went fishing yesterday. I had extra fish. Now I have a suffix. Did he really do the fishing for himself? And pshat is that he had extra fish, or is it pshat he really went fishing for me? So now I have a suffix. Then, im tzarich lahamtin b'kdei sheyasu, do you have to wait until after Yom Tov kdei sheyaseh in this case? Over here, we know that there's an Isser of Muktzah. That's for sure. I know that he went fishing today. So I know that at the onset of Yom Tov at Ben Hashmashas, this fish was Aser. It was Muktzah. So I know that the fish is Muktzah today. So for sure, the fish is Aser today. Question is, Matzah Yom Tov. Do I have to wait b'chtei sheyaseh because there's another problem of Meleches Isser? Because maybe he went fishing for me and I can't be nene from his malacha until after kedei sheyaseh, but that's only a suffix. So do I have to be makar on that suffix or not? That we say tali b'machloikis hamavur b'simin shin chaf hey siv zayin. That's based on that question is tali on a machloikis. It's dependent on a machloikis that we had back in Hilchos Shabbos in shin chaf hey. I didn't look it up, but I seem to remember that the question over there is, do we view this as a davar sheyesh lo matirin? Do we say that these fish, these apples, are a davar sheyesh lo matirin? Why should I eat them b'chtei sheyaseh? Let me wait until after b'chtei sheyaseh, and then they'll be mutter. I think that's what it's dependent on. Umizbar b'divrei ha'achreinim sham, And the Chavetz Chaim says, comes out from the words of the Achronim over there, the yesh lahakel l'tzarech mitzvah. That if it's a case of a tzarech mitzvah, maybe this is the only thing that you have for your Yom Tov Suda. You want to have basar v'dagim, you want to have either meat or fish for your Yom Tov Suda, and you didn't prepare any meat, and you don't have any other fish, and there's a tzarech mitzvah for your Yom Tov Suda, and why you would need it exactly within B'kdei Sheyasa, I'm not sure, but in that case, the tzarech mitzvah you could be making. Oid Mavurasham. It's also explained over there in Shin Chafei. Let's say both of these questions are a suffix. Im nilketu hayoim. We don't know if the non-Jew did the fishing today or we did it before Yom Tov. V'im nilketu b'shvil Yisrael. And we also don't know, did he do it for a Yid or did he not? So then, b'yoimon, on that day itself, so let's say Yom Tov is Tuesday, Wednesday, and you encountered the non-Jew on Tuesday. And now we have this suffix. We have two sveikas. Maybe he went fishing on Monday on Erev Yom Tov, or maybe he went fishing today. That's one suffix. The other suffix is, I don't know if he fished it for me or he fished it for himself. So then, b'yoimon asurim. On Tuesday, the fish are asur. Why? Ta'afilu vadai loy b'shvil Yisrael liktam. Because let's take away one of the sveikas. You have a suffix, did he fish for me or did he fish for himself? So we'll take away that suffix. Let's say that he didn't fish for you. Let's say he fished for himself. Doesn't matter. Still, also mishum suffix muchan kanal. That question, that suffix is irrelevant to the question of whether or not the fish are asur today. So there's no svek sveka. We don't have a double suffix whether or not the fish are asur on Tuesday, right? What are the two svekas? The two svekas are, did he go fishing on Monday or did he go fishing on Tuesday? If he went fishing on Monday, then the fish are mutter today on Tuesday. That's one suffix. We have another suffix. Did he fish for me or did he fish for himself? Why is that relevant to the question of whether or not the fish are asur on Tuesday? The fish are, if you went fishing today, if you went fishing on Tuesday, then the fish are asur on Tuesday, whether he went fishing for himself or he went fishing for me. Even if he went fishing for himself, there's still muktzah today. So there's only one suffix that's relevant to the question of whether or not the fish are asur on Tuesday. Did he go fishing on Monday or did he go fishing on Tuesday? The question of did he fish for himself or did he fish for me? That's irrelevant to the Isser on Tuesday. So on Tuesday, the fish are asur. Elo de be'erev mutarin miyad mishom svek sveka. But tonight, Tuesday night, now the fish become mutter immediately because now we have a svek sveka. What's the svek sveka? The svek sveka is if he fished on Tuesday and he fished for me, so then they don't become mutter until Matzah Yom Tov Rishon, until Tuesday night after Kadesh Yaseh, because until then I can't be nene from his Meleches Isser. But if he went fishing on Tuesday, but he went fishing for himself, it becomes mutter immediately Matzah Yom Tov Rishon. I don't have to wait to Kadesh Yaseh, right? Because then the only problem is muktzah, and the muktzah problem goes off immediately when Yom Tov Rishon is over. I don't have to wait Kadesh Yaseh. So to asir it on Matzah Yom Tov Rishon until after Kadesh Yaseh, that's only if you push both sveikas. I have to know that he fished on Tuesday, and I have to know that he did it for me. So that's a svek sveika. That I'm not mechuyev to be machmer on. So then it's mutter immediately Matzah Yom Tov Rishon. You don't have to wait for Kadesh Yaseh. Va'afilu hayu Yom Tov be'erev kigoin shnei Yom Tovim shel Goliath. Right, like I just explained. Okay, the Nachri shehevi darin li Yisrael. But when you're talking about a case where the guy actually brings you a gift, or in a case where he brought it for sale in a Yiddish town, so this is not you encountered your auto mechanic on the fishing pier. This is the auto mechanic knocked on your door and said, guess what, I have fresh flounder for you. In that case, then you do have to be machmir, even in this case, and you have to assume that he fished for you. Because that's an umdana already. If he knocked on your door to bring it to you, mistama, he went ahead and he fished for you. Or if he brought it for sale in a Yiddish town on Yom Tov, mistama, he fished with the intent to sell it to the Yidden. Okay, Ice Cotton Chavches. So the Mishnah Berurah said that these are asurim because of suffix. I am betaz ube'er agoyla. The Chavetz Chaim says you should look at the words of the Taz and the Be'er Agoyla. Ta'afilu b'Yom Tov Sheni yesh lesar. Let's say Yom Tov was Tuesday and Wednesday, and now our shaila is not on Tuesday. Our shaila is on Wednesday. On Wednesday, we encountered the Nachri, the non-Jew, on the fishing pier, or not on the fishing pier. We encountered him by his house cleaning what looks like freshly caught fish. And again, we have a suffix. We don't know exactly when these fish were caught. Were these fish caught today, or were these fish caught yesterday? If these fish were caught yesterday, they were caught on Yom Tov Rishon. So, okay, the Isser Muktzah doesn't carry over to Yom Tov Sheni. So if he caught them on Yom Tov Rishon, then there would be mutter on Yom Tov Sheni. But if he caught them on Yom Tov Sheni, then l'chayre there would be also on Yom Tov Sheni, because there were muktzah at the outset of Yom Tov Sheni, right? Tuesday night, Ben Hashmoshes. They going into Wednesday, going into Yom Tov Sheni, they were still in the water, so they were muktzah, so they're the muktzah on Yom Tov Sheni. But over here, you have a svek sveka. What's the svek sveka? Oh, sveka d'yoma. We don't know if Wednesday is really Yom Tov. Maybe Wednesday is really chayil. Maybe it's not kadosh. So l'chayra over here on Yom Tov Sheni, you could argue that you have a svek sveka. One suffix is maybe he didn't even catch the fish today. Maybe he caught the fish yesterday. Suffix number two, even if he caught the fish today, maybe today is really chayil. So l'chayra, you could make a good argument that we have a svek sveka. Says the Chavetz Chaim, however, here in Chav Ches, I am betazu be'ergoyla da'afilu b'Yom Tov Sheni yesh lesar. That we don't go with this svek sveka, and you should answer it even on Yom Tov Sheni. However, of a Mamar Mordechai befakfek al zeh. It depends. When you're talking about apples that may have been picked, over there, you should answer it even on Yom Tov Sheni, even in the face of the svek sveka. Why? Because they're all poskim that hold that this is not really so much of a svek sveka. Why? The kol sheyesh be'oisan haminan b'mechuber, if the apples are still mostly on the trees, and now you have freshly picked apples, then we assume that the apples were picked today. It's almost a vadai that the apples were picked today. So we can't call it a svek sveka. But when it comes to, let's say, fishing, mutter b'Yom Tov Sheni, then it would be mutter on Yom Tov Sheni because of the svek sveka. The lo shayich tam hanal v'hevelei sveka d'Rabbanan. Because over there, it's a svek sveka. On this is the Rabbanan. We're going to be makel. We're not going to assume that necessarily it was fish today. We don't have that same umdana that somebody went fishing for today. Sometimes people go fishing yesterday for fish that they didn't eat today. Okay. Let's go back up to the Mechaber and continue Siv Gimel. By me, it's 4 lines down near the end of the line, right before the Ois Katan Chav test of the Mishnah Berurah. Avol, however, let's say by looking at the produce or by looking at the fish, we could tell that they were not caught today. We could tell this is an apple that was not picked today. It's already a little soft. We could tell it's a fish that was not caught today. People who know fish, they could look at a fish and know how fresh this fish is. Then it doesn't seem to be, you don't have a problem over here of muktzah, right? It was caught yesterday. It was caught Erev Yom Tov. Or we're now on Yom Tov Sheni. It was caught on Yom Tov Rishon. So we don't have a muktzah problem over here. And we don't have a meleches isser problem. So then, mutter lemi shalai huvu bishvilai, then it's certainly mutter for anybody, any Yisrael, that the guy did not bring the apples or the fish for. And if we know that he didn't bring it from outside the tchum, mutter af lemi shehuvu bishvilai, then it's even mutter for the one that the guy brought it for, because there's no isser here at all. You see, if he brought it from outside the tchum, so it's very nice. We don't have a meleches isser problem because we know that he picked the apples and caught the fish on Erev Yom Tov. We don't have a muktzah problem for the same reason. But if he came from outside the tchum, we have a tchum problem. Okay, if a guy brings something for you from outside of the tchum, so then it's also for the person that it was brought for. But it's mutter for everybody else. But if we know that he came from within the tchum, then there's no problem at all. No muktzah problem, no meleches isser problem, no tchum problem. So then it's mutter for everybody. Says the Mishnah Berurah, Ois Cotton Chavtes, in Nikar Bahem, if you could tell by looking at the apples or by looking at the fish that they weren't caught today, explains the Chavetz Chaim, Shahayu Peres Kimushin. Let's say the apples were a little soft. V'hu adin linyan dagim, and the same when it comes to fish. Shani karim, shani tzaydu mi erev Yom Tov. We could tell that they were trapped on erev Yom Tov. How do you tell? And this is good if you ever go to the fish market. And now you have a Mishnah Berurah to tell you how to check the fish to know if the fish are fresh. Kegon shenos leichan, if they're not so moist. Va'demumis shetachas lechayehen. Or if you look at the gills and you see that underneath the gills they're not so red anymore. Shaboy kenai san sham. You check them over there. That's how you tell if they're fresh. Lamisha lehuvu bishvilai. Then, if it was brought from outside the tchum, then it's mutter for the one it wasn't brought for. The karmelon lekaban b'sifei, because when you see soon in sifei, the haba michutz l'tchum b'shvil Yisrael zeh, something that was brought from outside of the tchum by a non-Jew for a specific yid, mutter Yisrael acher. It's mutter for a different yid, afilu by b'yayim, even on that day. Now let's go to the Ramah, finish off Sif Gimel. Says the Ramah, Haggah, Eino Yehudi Misiach Lefi Tumai. If a non-Jew states out of innocence, he doesn't seem to have any agenda over here. He just makes an innocent, off-the-cuff statement. Shaloi Milkat Hayoim. He says these apples weren't picked today. Yeah, he'll tell you. You look at these apples and he says, "Oh yeah, aren't those beautiful apples? I was in the orchard yesterday and I picked them." So Misiach Lefi Tumai. He says that they were picked on erev Yom Tov. I need side ayoim, or the guy says, yeah, yesterday was such a beautiful day. I went fishing for 2 hours. I caught all these fish. Naman, he's Naman. Says the Mishnah Berurah is cut lamed aleph. Nachri mesiach lefi tumai. Hatam, the reason he's Naman is lefi shehuena mashbiach b'dvarav. He's not praising his fish. He's not increasing the value of his fish or his apples by what he's saying. Adarabah. Megareya, he's making it worse. If he wanted to make his product more valuable, he would say, I just picked these apples an hour ago, or I just went fishing an hour ago. So by making a statement that he picked them or he went fishing yesterday, Adarabah, he's hurting himself. He's not helping himself. And he's saying it was you could trust him. Well, Myri, however, we're talking about a case. This is only true if we could reasonably assume that this non-Jew has no idea that it makes a halachic difference to us whether he caught them yesterday or today. Because if it's not that way, if he knows that he's better off saying that they were caught today, but they were caught yesterday, because he knows that if they were caught on erev Yom Tov, then they're mutter for us, but if they were caught on Yom Tov, they're also for us. Then we have to say that he wants to increase the value of his produce. He wants to be able to make a sale. Then you can't trust him. Even if the guy is bringing this on Sunday, with Sunday is Yom Tov after Shabbos, and now he's making a Mesiach Lefi Tumai statement that they're 2 days old. He's coming on Sunday and he's saying that they were picked or caught on Friday. Or he brings them on the second day of Rosh Hashanah. However, you know what? This halacha over here, I'm going to go into tomorrow. So Mir Hashem, tomorrow we'll pick up over here in middle of this Mishnah Berurah at the words mihu. Now, just a bit of housekeeping. I mentioned earlier in a text message that I get a mazel tov, my son Baruch Hashem, at a boy in Cleveland, and the bris is tomorrow. So I'm going to be traveling later today and tomorrow. I'm not 100% sure what the status of tomorrow's shir will be. So stay tuned. I will let you know. Mish Hashem simchas by everyone. The schus of Torah should be megan against Klal Yisrael. The schus of limud HaTorah. I mentioned yesterday, my cousin Rav Asher, he said that we have to be mischazik both in limud HaTorah and in the simcha of Torah. I think really, and I've mentioned this many times, when we talk about simchas HaTorah, I always say, if you look in the Torah, when the Torah discusses the halachas of birchas HaTorah, the Torah says that the bracha of Asher Bachar Banu is not a birchas hamitzvahs. It's not like the bracha of al netilas lulav. That's the bracha of birchas hamitzvah that we make before we do the mitzvah of lulav. The bracha of Asher Bachar Banu Mikol Amim is a brachas Haidah. It's a bracha thanking the Rebbeinu Shalom for giving us the Torah HaKadoshah. We have to realize how fortunate we are that we have a Torah. Look at the rest of the world. Look at the empty lives that they lead. And look at how rich our lives are because we have a Torah HaKadoshah. It's not only the simcha of when you sit down and you learn a Shver Taisus and you feel good that you figured out Pshat in the Taisus. It's the simchas HaChayim, the simcha that you have in life, the nachas that you have from kids and from Eneklach, the rich family life that you have. That's all because you're a from a Yid. The beautiful Yom Tovim that you have, all because you're a from a Yid. The sense and structure that there is to your day because you're a from a Yid. The opportunity that you have to be mispal because you're from a Yid. This is all we make a brachas haidah to the Rebbeinu Shalom HaShabbat Chabadu Mikol Amim. That's the simcha that we have to bring to all of our shmiras hamitzvahs, to all of our avodas Hashem. We have to bring that simcha shel mitzvah. Thank you so much for joining me for limud HaTorah. Be well.